This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody. Billy Embody. 1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I'm Billy Embody. With me, as always, is Hayden Howerton. Hayden, how was the weekend, first of all? Let's check in there right off the bat before we get into our presenting sponsor.
Man, the Howertons went 2-0, man. Mustangs got a huge win. Abilene Christian got a nice win as well. It was just good vibes all around over here.
Well, hey, that's all we can ask for. Big weekend on the gridiron. And hey, if you really wanted to, Hayden, if we could pinch some pennies together, we could have gotten our presenting sponsor to get you to and from SMU's game in Louisville, the noon game, and then get over to see Abilene play. And statusjet.com is our presenting sponsor. You can reach out to David Henry and his team at statusjet.com. Use code PonyUpACC. That gets you a discount on a round trip flight when you book with them. And hey, it all helps. And now we're already one road game down in the month of October. They've got Stanford that they can still book you on, still get you out to. And look, after that top 25 win by the Mustangs, a lot of people are making some late moves to make it out to Palo Alto. And you can be one of them. And you can do it in style with friends, family, take some clients, do whatever you want. And that is the great thing about the private jet life with Status Jet. They can get you there with that level of luxury you'd expect. And of course, use that discount on the Pony Express or mention the Pony Up ACC discount on that round trip flight, and they'll get you taken care of. All right. Speaking of taking care of, SMU taking care of business on the road at Louisville, a 34-27 win to kick off what was a wild Saturday of college football overall. It was kind of surreal walking in there from my vantage point. I went to Norman last year. I haven't been to a huge road environment for SMU in probably since maybe they played Baylor all those years ago, before Norman last year. And then this year, being at Louisville, noon kick, fresh off college game day on big ESPN, it was a really cool experience. You know, the stadium was great. It was, wasn't packed to the gills or anything like that, but it was loud. They played loud music. Their fans are into it. I mean, it is a good environment to watch college football. And SMU, right off the bat, they were able to quiet them down. But this was a huge start to the day for the ACC.
ACC was certainly in the spotlight, man. You said it. Game day led straight into our game. Game day obviously was in Berkeley and California for the big Cal-Miami matchup that we'll get to later. But, no Lee Corso this week, so we do wish him a speedy recovery as he recovers from his illness this past week. But going into our game, man, what a win for the program. I mean, get our first ACC road victory. That was huge. You got to be super pumped for the guys. And you saw the locker room post-game, whether that was Kevin Jennings' Instagram Live or just the certain videos that our guys ended up posting. I mean, guys are excited now, and they've got a lot of confidence after this week, like they should. But, man, you and I had a really hard time predicting this game. I mean, this was a dangerous Louisville offense. This was the hardest game on our schedule besides Florida State when we looked at it in the preseason. It was kind of one that we all scratched our heads and went, man, I don't know about this. It's going to be hard to go on the road and beat this dangerous team. But the game came down to the wire. The resilience of this team was on display after they gave up an 11-point lead. And fortunately, we were able to hold on for that major victory.
And I think if you get down to it, starting fast was really key. Once again, on the road, being able to quiet a crowd. And I can tell you, I mean, it's the nice thing in a press box when they actually have the windows open or if they have a door open that you can feel the stadium. Like that was really cool, in a sense, just because that's what big time college football is all about, is feeling that stadium, the energy in it. And when SMU went right down the field and scored, it was silent. It was like a library. And there were some SMU fans. They were across the way from me, so they were making noise, but I don't know how well it traveled all the way up to the press box. But for that crowd, it was really kind of put on its heels early on. And I think you've got to give the offense a lot of credit for being ready to go like that. And, it starts with Kevin Jennings, especially with how banged up, quite frankly, Brashard Smith is. He needs this bye week in a big way. And KJ delivered.
Yeah, we had certainly leaned on the running game a lot in the last few weeks, and it had paid off for us in those games. But we definitely needed a great showing from Kevin in the receiving core. And KJ came through, man. He's improved every week since taking over this starting role. But I want to give a quick shout out to Preston Stone, man. He is a hell of a teammate, and I'm glad he's on our team. He came in, played one snap when Kevin went down he got a little bump and bruise, and he throws a freaking touchdown pass. They have an RPO. He checks it to a little fade ball and throws one up. And Keyshawn's able to come down with it. I mean, what a play. I'm glad he was able to make that happen for us. But this was an offensive battle between these two quarterbacks, both KJ and Tyler Shuck. But at the end of the day, KJ definitely outplayed Tyler Shuck, in my opinion. And KJ played the best game of his career. 21 for 27, 281 yards through the air. He didn't have a passing touchdown, but he also threw no picks, which is just as important. He had 13 straight completions to start the game. And then on top of that, man, he added 113 yards on the ground, which included a 59-yard scamper for a touchdown. I mean, that looked like Lamar Jackson in Lamar's own stadium. So Kevin had 394 yards on his own. This offense definitely ran through number 7 for us. And to compare that to Tyler Shuck, he had 329 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns. But he had negative 26 yards on the ground thanks to 3 sacks by our defense. And then he had 5 scrambles, which yielded minimal results. He also threw a game-ending interception in the end zone on Louisville's final possession. And then just to compare quarterback ratings, Kevin had a 95.8. Tyler Shuck, who is a guy that I think around this league people have looked at to be an all-conference player, he was only 77.8. So Kevin was definitely able to go outplay a great quarterback in his own stadium.
And, Kevin ended up second on SMU's all-time single game, straight completions. And so credit to him. I mean, we kind of looked up and we were like, wow, he really hasn't thrown one. And when you're not watching the broadcast, I don't know if they were reminding people or not on the broadcast, but he was just dealing and so consistent. And I mean, his first incompletion, I think, was a high ball to RJ, kind of in that end of the 2-minute drill. And then the next one was, throwaway. I mean, but then he overcame, I think, so much adversity in the second half when things weren't going perfectly. SMU moved the ball. Don't get me wrong, but they stalled out, kicked a field goal, missed another one. And I think that game showed where his confidence at, which is it's pretty high. Elijah Roberts was talking about him talking some trash, but also just his mental makeup. I mean, he has the confidence, but when you're faced with adversity, how do you respond? You responded with an 89-yard touchdown drive.
Look, man, we've said it. We said it week 0. It is extremely hard to win on the road. We saw that against Nevada. This was a ranked team. I know we talked a little bit about the environment. It was a little underwhelming from an attendance standpoint. 50K in a 65,000 stadium, but it was loud, man. You could tell on TV. They're pumping in music. I mean, people are really getting into the ball game, and that's intimidating for an offense with a fairly young quarterback in a new conference. But we went out and we were able to take care of business. I mean, yeah, the defense gave up some points and allowed Louisville back into this game, but SMU's offense made it count where we needed it when we put together a massive touchdown drive at the end of the game to go get it done. And then give the ball back to Louisville. They drive the field, but we're able to come away with that big game sealing interception. And I've talked about it before, man. The culture shows up in tight games. And this is a game where we went out and we were able to execute when it matters. And situational football is almost more important than just your raw talent level.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, SMU has done such a good job, I feel like, continuing to improve on things week in, week out. And I think this is a game where obviously they come away with a win, so everybody's happy. But to get that win, you needed to play turnover free, which SMU hadn't completely done. You had to get more pressure on the quarterback. You had to protect Kevin Jennings. And they've been able to do both of those things. Obviously, they were eating against Florida State. Don't get me wrong, but Louisville was in a much better situation. And this game showed the depth of the defensive line. And we'll talk about them for sure. But they were able to get after him and kind of keep chipping away. Like early in the game, their first scoring drive, for example, they hit a big explosive. I mean, Jalen Davis Robinson has to be better there. You're in zone, it's apparent, and he just kind of runs right by you. And you've just got to be more disciplined there. But your defensive line to that point really didn't start off getting a lot of pressure. And they were able to just turn that into sacks when it mattered. 3 in the fourth quarter. I mean, that was winning time, and they came through. And I think they've been able to continue to build on the little things that they've done well, but not maybe as consistent as they've liked. And this past game wasn't perfect, but again, you're playing a top 25 team. Like, this is not playing Charlotte. I think I said that on the board. Like, this is a different ball game on the road, and it's not going to be, sunshine and whatever. It's you have to continue to improve, and that's something that SMU's done each week, and it was apparent against Louisville.
I think one of the most encouraging things about this ball game is that we didn't play perfect. There were guys getting turned loose in the secondary. We weren't able to be very effective in our pass rush. I think the offensive line played okay. I don't think it was their best showing, but we were still able to come out with a victory. And that's great because we get to go into this next bye week and say, hey, guys, here's what we still need to work on, and we have things to continue to improve where we come out the other side a better football team. I thought defense traveled pretty well in the run game. There were times where Louisville's offensive line put the game on their back, but we bowed up when it mattered. But take away some chunk plays. Guys got lost in coverage, where they just got behind the DBs, where that was obviously extremely concerning, but it's also something that we can make adjustments and learn from going forward. And, maybe it leads to, guys being more disciplined. Maybe it just leads to better tackling because there were some broken tackles. These guys had 200 yards after catch. I mean, we've got to drop those guys where they're at, the first time, whether it's safeties, corners, or if that's just the linebackers in pursuit. So we're going to be able to improve and do things better on defense.
Yeah, and I mean, there were some plays that when you're going up against a high caliber of athlete, I mean, shout out to Corey Brooks for absolutely eating on his 3 catches, but I mean, if you would have asked SMU if they would have been okay with 3 catches from Ja'Cory Brooks, they probably would have said yes beforehand. But the problem was they were huge plays. The one with Smoke, they get behind him. That's correctable. That's eyes. That's not you're physically mismatched. That is just straight up, you've got to do your job and be the deepest guy. And then Jonathan McGill, poor him, gets turned around and it was just kind of not a comedy of errors because it wasn't like the result was terrible. But he was there he should have gotten him down. I mean, that was the end. But he was so turned around. It just was one of those plays that got loose and he ended up scoring. So those are going to keep Scott Simons up, I'm sure. That's the type of guy that he is. But when you look at these keys to the game, SMU took care of business with a lot of them.
Yeah, let's talk about my keys to the game, man. My first one was we got to ignore the noise. SMU had to be the most excited team to play, the most disciplined team to play, and they had to block out all of the rat poison going into this week. And I thought they did that. They did a great job of coming out focused. There was no lull like there sometimes is in an 11 o'clock game. And this team took the ball, drove down, scored a touchdown, and the game just got rolling from there. We needed defense to travel. Tyler Shuck had taken care of the ball all year, and he had only had 1 turnover. We forced a big one when it mattered at the very end of the game. We also forced a turnover on downs, which I know doesn't go on the stat sheet as a traditional turnover, but that was huge to give them 0 points and give the ball back to our offense. We needed to continue to put hats on the football. I think we can do a better job going forward, but you got to give props to Louisville. They did a nice job taking care of the ball against this defense. Secondly, we needed offense to capitalize and start the scoring earlier. We never trailed in this game. Like I said, we went up 7-0 and we never looked back. And yes, the game got tied, but we were able to go to my third point, which was take the crowd out of it, start running the ball. Did a nice job of silencing the stadium where we could go to work, get our operations down. And I think we went 3 for 3 on my keys to the game this week.
Yeah, tough to argue with that. And I think, and we're finding this out after the fact, right? But the mini movie, I don't know if you've been tuning in religiously, like some people have, but SMU's been releasing this movie afterwards, and it kind of starts early in the game week with a little bit of the behind the scenes look at what the conversation is like in the team room back in Dallas, or in Dallas when they're playing at home. And I thought Maurice Crum talking about the rumble in the jungle and turning it on Louisville and talking about how Muhammad Cassius Clay was, an underdog and beat George Foreman and all of those things, and how Louisville's using it as this big thing. Well, hey, it's SMU's time to do that too, and they're an underdog going into this game. And I think some of the things, like you said, that focus, that ignore the noise, not only did they ignore it, they turned around and used it for their own betterment and focus. I mean, they brought Kobe Wilson out a lot lately in media and post game and things like that. And this past week, it was Elijah Roberts, who's always fantastic. But I mean, you can tell some of those things, like that Maurice Crum was talking about, are very much reflected in how the linebackers are playing right now. And then it trickles over to the rest of the team as the message obviously gets through to them. But how about Rhett Lashley just letting his assistants have that type of a platform? It's not always that way at different programs, and I'm not saying it's wrong for others not to do that, but there's a very good message that we've seen in these mini movies, and they're translating onto the field, and you can see why the guys are so bought in right now and playing as well as they are.
This is a team that when it was announced that we were going to the ACC last year, teams were clowning us. They were saying they're buying their way in. They don't deserve to be here. And that has to motivate these guys and want to go out on Saturday and prove, hey, not only do we belong here, we have a shot to win this thing in year one. And so you're right. These mini movies, it's been kind of a cool deal to watch how the season's been progressing. You're kind of watching the little stories that are going into each week, and you're able to see what's motivating these guys on a weekly basis, whether that's family stuff or that's just, hey, they're putting X out there, so here's how we're going to react to it. And I love the guys that they've chosen to represent the team in each of these weeks. I mean, you said Kobe Wilson, Elijah Roberts, two guys that we're probably going to have to get on this podcast at some point, to get their story behind all of it. But I couldn't be happier for who they're choosing to put forward to represent the program.
And I think the thing that is probably lost in all of this a little bit because of KJ's big day is that they did it without Brashard Smith being at his best and healthy. And clearly he's he needs his bye week. Let's just put it like that. And everyone does. Everybody's beat up. You play a 4-game stretch like SMU has, even though there's another bye sprinkled there after the BYU game. This was a physical football game. I thought there was a lot of chippiness about it in a way, some good battles, but you could tell, I think both teams had a lot of respect for each other. And I think SMU's trenches ultimately won out, which is obviously your favorite part of the game, I would imagine. But that's sometimes what it's all about. It's not a 30-minute game. It's not a 45-minute game. It's a 60-minute game. And somebody on the board said, and it could have gone the other way, right? Like the margin of error is so thin. But somebody said, late third quarter after SMU had blown its lead, said, "Oh man, you're lamenting it," which of course you would anyway. But there's 60 minutes of football, and this team has shown pretty much all year that they're going to be ready to go for the full 60, not 45.
It's a team effort, man. Football is an 11-man game where everybody matters, especially when running the football. Yes, Brashard has had an incredible season, but when he had arguably a down game compared to what we've seen with only 13 rush attempts for 52 yards, no touchdowns, we needed to lean on somebody else. And fortunately for us, that was Kevin Jennings. Kevin Jennings did an incredible job of keeping the Louisville defense on their toes. We played a little bit of a different game than we did previously, had a little more designed quarterback stuff. Kevin would get out of the pocket, and then he would take off. Career highs in rushing and passing yards. We also held their number one defensive end to 1 tackle. That was big stuff from our offensive tackles. I know the offensive line didn't probably have their best showing, but that was a silver lining for them. this was a really solid defensive front, and we're going to continue to watch tape and improve in that offensive line room. But it's a full season thing for the offensive line. They're going to have to continue to gel. They're going to have to continue to get better every week. Garen Justice is going to continue to push these guys throughout the bye week. They're not going to sit around and skip practice, and just take veteran days off like you do in the NFL. These guys are going to get after it every day. I also saw where we huddled a little bit. We tried to slow this game down and try to play some more big boy football. Yes, we still got to our tempo stuff, which was definitely needed after chunk plays and things like that to keep the defense on their heels. But we lost the time of possession battle to Louisville. They held the ball for over 10 minutes in the third quarter. I mean, you got to give props to them. They were taking over that game with their offensive line. But we have stayed true to the ground game. We rushed for 190. I know that 59 of that came from a huge Kevin Jennings scramble. But Bouchard was still making an impact everywhere he can, man. He got the ball whenever he could, and he's still fighting for extra yards, which led to the fumble, air quotes, that we ended up getting back, which his shin was down. You can see it on the slow-mo, but on the TV, they never really showed it that way. We also did a tremendous job in the passing game. We improved greatly through that. I mean, RJ Maryland had 6 receptions for 83 yards. He had a ridiculous one-handed grab. I mean, that was one of the best catches I've seen. Keyshawn Smith, he had the touchdown grab from Preston. Jake Bailey had some big-time plays. So we're really spreading this offense around, and a bunch of different guys are showing up on the stat sheet every week of big-time commitment and contribution from those guys.
And I know you're going to be the harshest critic, besides maybe Garen Justice on the offensive line, but I was listening to a lot of Louisville post-game radio driving to the airport after the game, and I mean they were just wondering, when is this defensive line going to step up? When they were saying this is an unacceptable performance, and I mean, this is a group that had been playing pretty well, at least on paper, all year long, and so to get that type of response from pundits or fans and things like that calling into the show was, I thought, pretty impressive from SMU, because Louisville has kind of spent in that regard to try and upgrade that group. So kudos to the SMU offensive line for still getting it done. It was tough sledding though when it came to running the football. It wasn't whatever kind of lanes or maybe meshing that they had in the last couple of games. It maybe dropped down a little bit, but it was just hard to get things set up for that offensive line, but they were ultimately able to put it together late. And the same thing goes for the defensive line stepping up in a big way.
Yeah, these were big time run stuff in defensive linemen. I mean, they were all graded very highly on PFF, and I was happy that this offensive line was still able to come away with the win. The only reason I'm holding them to a high standard is because I've seen what their best can be. And so I continue to expect that from the O-line. Garen Justice expects that. Rhett Lashley expects that. And they expect that of themselves, most importantly. These guys are a little disappointed that they're not able to put the game on their back every game, because that's what an offensive lineman wants to do. You want to rush for 350 and no sacks every game. But they're going to be able to do that. They're going to face teams where, hey, we're going to need this offensive line to come through. And I have confidence that they're going to be able to. But yeah, let's move over to the defense, man. D-line continues to come up huge for us. I mean, like we talked about, they got some chunk plays, but it was bend, don't break whenever we needed it. The big turnover on downs, but we stuffed them twice on 3rd and 4th and 1. On top of that, we forced 26 pressures as a team on 38 dropbacks, 3 sacks on Tyler Shuck. I mean, these boys were out there feasting, man. These guys were pinning their ears back, playing with a lot of confidence, and they were playing really well against a good Louisville offensive line group. I know the Louisville offensive line meetings were probably pretty tough, yesterday and today as they look ahead. But Isaiah Nakwobia, he also came up with a huge interception on the 4th down at the end of the game. And he's a guy that comes up with big interceptions in big games when you need it. I think back to the conference championship last year where he had one late in the 4th quarter. And defensively, like we talked about, continue to limit yards after catch. The 86-yard touchdown by Ja'Cory Brooks. I mean, it was probably 65 yards after catch, and really contact on that one that Jonathan McGill just couldn't come up with the tackle. But those things happen in big boy football, man. Ja'Cory Brooks is a dog. Yep. I mean, he is a really, really good wide receiver. He's going to be a guy that's going to play on Sundays, and we got ran on pretty good in the third quarter. Louisville put up 216 yards in that quarter. It was more than they put up in the entire first half. Their running back, Isaac Brown, 10 rushes for 117 yards per game. That was 53 on one rush. So like we talked about, there's definitely things to improve, but there's also things to circle of, hey, we need more of this. This was awesome.
And I think I'll be interested to see what, I guess Stanford will probably be in the I formation a good bit too. That's something that they do, but you also aren't going to see it that often from a group that can do it to that level. Stanford's coming off a 31-7 loss at home to Virginia Tech. I mean, they're kind of in an interesting position here. They're still building a program. They have got to, do a lot of things to turn it around. And I still think they're a good, well-coached football team. And obviously, we'll talk more about them really next week and things like that and previewing them. But it is such a unique look to get in college football these days is the I formation. And Jeff Brom, he went away from it, truthfully. And in those 3rd and 1s, in those 4th and 1s, they weren't in it. They were in shotgun. And so it's definitely something where he's either overthinking it or, has a play dialed up in particular that he really likes. But, SMU, I mean, you have to play the game and the cards that you're dealt. It is very nice sometimes when somebody doesn't do something that is absolutely killing your defense, and you kind of get dealt that hand and it works out. And I do feel like SMU's defense ultimately stepped up in that 4th quarter and were able to make big disruptive plays. We talked about the sacks and negative plays. You mentioned all the pressures. I mean, that was the first time I've even heard the pressure number. You would have thought, kind of looking at the first quarter and maybe just some of the things around that game with those big explosives, that, man, SMU didn't get any pressure all day. They got pressure on most of the dropbacks.
Coaches are lucky that I'm not an athletic director. If it's short yardage and my offense is in the shotgun, that's a fireable offense, in my opinion. But yeah, it's just one of those deals where it's the same as running the football, where you're just going to keep pounding away and eventually you're going to spring one. This defensive line group kept getting close. And, they kept winning their battles, whether it be late, whether that was twists, where they were just getting pressure and forcing Tyler Shuck to get that ball out quick. Eventually they were going to get home, and they were able to in those big moments. It's just one of those deals where you keep fighting, you keep scratching, you keep clawing, and it'll eventually pay off.
All right, before we get the MVPs, we got to leave people with a little reminder, and that is that you should reach out to our friends at AKM Turf and Greens to schedule your consultation. They'll come out and look at your backyard or your green space that needs a total renovation and makeover, and they'll do it for free. They'll come out, survey everything. They can tell you pretty much exactly how much it's going to cost as well, whether you want to add putting greens or just all turf grass, or you want to do some different coloring to make it look like a sand trap, or, you have some interesting design maybe that you want. They can get it all handled for you and get your backyard looking like an entertainment, perfect place for that by the time they're done. And they'll get things done pretty quickly. So use code PONYUP for $500 off your first project today. Go to akmturfandgreens.com or email info@akmturfandgreens.com. Today, we just had another subscriber check them out. So it's time that you do as well. All right. MVP time.
All right, let's get a little rules recap. I caught some flack for not giving it to Kevin Jennings. Look,
really?
This is a Biggs O-line and D-line MVP, because Kevin Jennings has obviously played great. He would be my MVP if it was up to everybody. He would have been my MVP last week, but that's what I'm trying to avoid. I'm trying to avoid giving it to the same guys over and over again. I'm trying to avoid giving it to the guys who are already in the spotlight. So, Billy, that's your job to give the whole game MVP. You can give it to whoever you want. But for me, I'm going to recognize the guys who get a little smaller recognition, maybe a little smaller, NIL money kind of deal. But this week, it was definitely a defensive lineman. I thought they played well yet again, against a good Cardinals front. I'm going to give it to one of our leaders who continues to show up in big moments, a guy that I'm glad that he's representing the program. Billy, we saw him walk into class, on that Friday before Florida State, when we were hanging out with Eric McLean, and he's walking by us with his books in his hand. He's our highest graded defensive lineman this season. He was the highest graded this week as well. I want to give it to Elijah Roberts. Big sack, 6 pressures on top of that, and just continues to show up.
How do you feel about the L's down? That's what you got to give to people that are, giving you grief, is just throw them down, like Elijah did after that sack. He was waiting for it. He saw Roderick do it after his touchdown, and he said, I want a little bit of that. And, hey, that's a great pick. You'll never hear me argue with picking Elijah Roberts. He's an absolute stud for this team.
Hey, I've given it to Tank a couple weeks. I've tried to spread it around as best as I can, but he's the most deserving this week.
Well, the good thing for me is that I don't have to do any other searching, looking, because Kevin Jennings, first SMU quarterback in a decade to go for 200 in the air and 100 on the ground. And what can you say about him that, hasn't already been said? First of all, those 13 straight completions to start, play turnover free, extend plays, his moxie. Did you see that one play to RJ? I'm 99% sure it was to RJ, where he scrambled right and then set up knew where the yard marker was, mind you, and then stood there like he was going to pass. He was like, oh, no, look at this. I've got space to throw it and all that. And then he took off and ran. So actually I had the whole thing confused, but that was the type of baiting that confident quarterbacks do. And he's just been stellar. And so you've got to give him the MVP. There's no doubt about it. He engineered that thing, as Rhett Lashley called him, the point guard after the game. We're seeing, somebody texted me during the game. And again, fans can get ahead of themselves, and we can get ahead of ourselves all we want. But he said, how many years does Kevin have left? I said, well, a few more games this year and then 2 more after that. He was like, okay, so this year and next year. I said, whoa. Don't discount the NIL these days. If he's an all ACC quarterback and he has a chance to come back for that 2026 season, he's going to get a pretty penny, and it might not be a bad thing for him to come back. And you look at the guys that do well in the NFL that are drafted, it is normally the guys that have actually played a lot of college football. It's not, like if Anthony Richardson ends up being great, he's going to buck such a trend, because I think he has 13 starts in college or something like that, or had 13 starts. So anyway, if Kevin Jennings starts these next 2.5 years and they're very, good years, SMU will, continue to reward him and take care of him. He's getting taken care of now. That's why he didn't leave in the offseason in part. And he knew his time was eventually going to come, and he's seeing why it pays sometimes, both literally and figuratively, to stick things out. And to get to 5-1 now and him see everything ahead of himself, although he needs to keep his head down, you're looking at a guy who has a case to be an all ACC quarterback if he keeps this up.
Yeah, these guys are getting taken care of. There's no doubt about that. From what I've talked to, these guys are making pretty much NFL money here at this level, which is great. I love it. We're able to get great players because of it. But you look at some of the veteran quarterbacks who stay into the year. Peyton Manning came back for his senior year. Obviously, Tom Brady played 5 years at Michigan, and while he wasn't a high draft pick, look what it turned out for him. Baker Mayfield played a lot of college football. There's a lot of guys that benefit off of getting extra college experience versus leaving, and Anthony Richardson is the one that comes to mind as far as just how young he is with his NFL career. And you saw it with multiple guys when I was in the league, but that does trend typically. The more college you play, the better off you're going to be, because you've just seen more ball.
Yeah. So Kevin's just getting going, but a very bright future ahead for him, and maybe for SMU if that's the case. This team all of a sudden looks like an ACC championship contender, and they are contending. But these last 2 weeks, they've really looked like a contender, and they've just got to keep their head down and keep working, which is, at least on the good side of things, that appears to be what Rhett Lashley and his staff have really instilled in this program so far.
It's hard to believe the season's halfway over, man. I think you look at this scheduled preseason, I think people would have been excited to be 4-2, and we're sitting here at 5-1 in the driver's seat for the ACC. I know there's 3 teams that could theoretically all win out and win the and all be undefeated in conference, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. this team just needs to focus on itself and come out of the bye fresh, re-energized and ready to take on Stanford in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun to watch it play out. And speaking of a lot of fun, I know you probably didn't catch much of this college football crazy world that we lived on Saturday, and I didn't catch much of it either. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, 6 top 10 teams lost, and SMU kicked it off with a top 25 upset.
College football is the best, man. You don't see this in the NFL. Guys don't talk about like, oh, the Panthers beat the Chiefs. People talk about the fact Vanderbilt just upset Alabama.
Yeah.
So let's be real. College football is crazy. You can say it's crazy this year. It's insane every year, and that's what makes it so great. So coast to coast this week, SMU was the best game in the 11 o'clock slot. We went out, we performed, played well, got a dub. And so I want to start with the game day game, because I want to channel that energy. I've said it before. I want to hope for a Highland Park appearance from game day here at some point, hopefully the Pitt game. But shout out to Kirk Herbstreit. He was the only host who picked SMU, and who knows, maybe he's a future guest on this podcast, but we'll see.
Channel that.
So we'll start with the game day game. Top 10 Miami travels to Bear territory, take on Cal Berkeley. Cal obviously got off to a hot start this season, and in the game, it was 21-10 at half, and then it was 35-10 with 8 minutes left in the third, but it was all Miami from that point on. The Canes come back. They won in regulation by scoring 21 unanswered in the fourth quarter, capped off with a 92-yard game-winning touchdown drive. Greg Ward Jr. is balling. I mean, he is one of the, if not the front runner for the Heisman as Miami stays unbeaten after back-to-back scares.
Yeah, that was wild. And I shut it down. I did. I was out. I was tired, and I was like, I'm not staying up for this, although I really, really wanted to, and couldn't get it done. You know what? And speaking of couldn't get it done, Cal couldn't, but they have a lot to be proud of. They've played a lot of good football lately. That's why they've gotten the college game day game. And, Miami's just on a roll. They were able to, get past them. And I'll say this, Ward has got to, really keep an eye on his lax style with the ball. It's going to come back and bite them at some point. When you talk about him throwing all the way across his body and return for a touchdown, I mean, that, as our friend Eric McLean said on the Gramlich and McLean podcast that I listened to, that should have been what broke the camel's back. I mean, really, that was the backbreaker, but they came all the way back and were able to figure it out. So kudos to them for going all the way out to the West Coast. I saw something really interesting, and luckily for SMU, I mean, they don't have to go all the way out to the West Coast. They're just going, the halfway trip basically. But Indiana went out on Friday actually, and they were able to just kind of get to the hotel at the same time that they normally do on Friday, and they played really, really well because of it. When they went out to maybe it was somebody. Oh, yeah. When they went out and played UCLA, they actually went out there and got in on Friday and got to the hotel, and they did a little walkthrough and moved around a little bit. And then they woke up and played the game. And maybe that might be the move for college teams. The NFL is, as we know, very much that, all right, we're going out Friday. We'll have a practice, walkthrough on Saturday, or, however the organization does it. But I mean, these college teams, it's a lot of time for the guys to be on the road, a lot of things to do. They're either missing class or they're in virtual class, or, they just don't have, I don't know, they don't have contracts and things like that, like curfews to keep you in bed. I mean, they do, but they don't. It's just kind of a different world. I wonder if we'll see that change. Sorry to go on a tangent.
No, I was actually going to talk about that too. I mean, in the NFL, yeah, you get there on Friday, you go eat dinner, you're kind of going out and enjoying the city that you're in. I mean, we went and played at DC, and it was kind of all right, see you tonight for dinner after an 11 o'clock practice. So guys just kind of go out and do whatever they feel like. And, for Miami guys going all the way to Berkeley, that probably wasn't exactly their jam. But still, you turn college guys loose, what are they going to do? They're going to find some way to get in trouble.
Yeah. Speaking of getting in trouble, and we'll get back to coast in a second, but a lot of people have gotten a lot of trouble probably from their significant others for how much money they're spending with our friends at Robach. And you can reach out to Robach and get on their website and chat with them if you have any questions about things, which is great. But the big thing that we want to impress upon you guys is that you can use code PonyExpress20 for 20% off your order at Robach.com. That's RHOBACK.com. First time customers only. It's starting to cool down. By the time SMU plays at home, it'll be November. So make sure you get the hoodie. I'm rocking the hoodie right now. I'll flash it up here as the screen comes down, but super comfortable. The Triple D, it's the way to go. And they've been a great partner. People are jumping all over their stuff. They continue to add things. And I think that's in part of SMU fans jumping all over it. So make sure everybody that you go on there, first time customers only, go to Robach.com, use code PonyExpress20 for 20% off your order today. And look, we appreciate all the support. And talk about the support that Vandy football is going to be getting. Donations are going to be flying in. You got guys maybe getting some NIL deals, all of those things. And it's all coming together for them after that upset win. Clark Leah, congratulations, man. You did something that's never been done before.
Upset number 1. Never been done by Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt had never even beaten a top 5 team. They were 1-60 all time versus number 1 after their win on Saturday. Vandy stormed the field. They tore down the goalpost, and then they carried them 3 miles down Broadway before finally dumping them in the Cumberland River. That is a long walk, man. I've lived in Nashville before. I've walked around Vanderbilt. You're a ways from the river. Vandy says they're going to cut them up. They're going to auction the pieces off. What a cool way to commemorate that win. Vandy was fined $100K for storming the field. It's an SEC rule. I get it's all about safety. That's such a dumb rule, man. But Arkansas was also fined for storming their field as they upset number 4 Tennessee in Fayetteville. So Vols definitely had a chance to win, something I want to talk about situationally. Quarterback Nico Iamaleava, you'll have to excuse my pronunciation there. He had a chance to throw a game-winning pass as time expired. Vols were on the Arkansas 20, and he rolls out to the right, and then he just gets pushed out of bounds by the Hog defender. He wasn't able to make a throw to the end zone, and the game just ends. I don't know what his situational awareness is on CFB, but that thing's got to get lowered after this weekend. Arkansas ended up being fined $250K. It's their second offense of storming the field, but it's well worth it, in my opinion.
Hey, kudos to Sam Pittman for having his guys ready to play. And that's the thing that, an Arkansas program that going into the year and even at the end of last year, their fans are ready to, axe them, move on, do all those things. And I'm not saying he's the guy for them to, elevate to the next level that they want to. But whenever you have a guy like him running the show, you're going to find ways to win a game here and there that you shouldn't have, or that you're a heavy underdog. And that's because his mindset is so consistent in terms of, how hard the guys should play, how they should be preparing and all of those things. And we saw that really reflect in that win. It was gritty. It was not pretty either, but they were able to, get it done. And that's all that matters.
He's an offensive lineman. I love me some Sam Pittman because of that. All of his units, when he was at Georgia, he had some guys who were just so tough up front, guys that, yes, he had crazy athletes, he put multiple top 10 picks in the league, but just their mentality of how they go out and attack each game and they play with great technique. Arkansas, while I know he hasn't led them to an SEC championship yet, he's a guy that if I'm athletic director out there in Fayetteville, he's a guy that I've got to keep around.
Yeah, it's trending that way for sure. And speaking of keeping a guy around, Curt Cignetti is doing an unbelievable job at Indiana. 6-0, second time in program history, 1967. But he's familiar for SMU. SMU faced James Madison, in the past, and they've had some good football teams. And they were able to keep on keeping on.
First year as a head coach, man, is always tough. You're not really sure what's going to happen. You've got to rip out the old culture and install your own. But man, they're 6-0. You said it, first time in almost 50 years. He was at JMU before. Before that, he was the head coach at IUP. I had to look up where that was. Indiana University of Pennsylvania. So he's definitely been on the fast track. He's one of the hottest names now in college football because of what he's done with the Hoosier program. Indiana is now looking like a proud football team. I saw a comparison of the guys in the locker room singing the fight song after last year, and there's like maybe 4 guys singing, and this year, everybody in that locker room is screaming it as loud as they can. They're just so happy for that program to be back, similar to how we were in 2019 when we started winning for the first time in a long time. And Hoosiers went out and beat Northwestern on the shore of Lake Michigan. Northwestern's in kind of a weird temporary stadium. They are renovating Ryan Field, but they were able to get the win 41-24 before their bye.
All right. I watched this game with a friend of the show. Or I should say I watched the end of this game with a friend of the show, and I'm not sure there's a happier person on planet Earth Friday night than one Mr. Bill Armstrong. And
I was wondering.
This is it. This is before you get into the game, I just want to say this: that some of the TCU fans, and I'm not trying to attack or whatever, but some of the fans that are on Twitter, I'm not saying it's the entire fan base feeling this way, but the giving up of tickets or the I'm out or whatever. All right, I get it. People get upset, but have some perspective of what SMU has gone through over the last 40 years to even get back to this stage, let alone be in a 5-1 position. Just pump your brakes. Your athletic department at some point will take care of whatever is going on, and you will chart a new course at some point. But good Lord, you coming off of Gary Patterson, and you were just in the national championship 2-ish years ago. Like, relax. Like, if Sonny doesn't end up being the guy there, which it's not looking great, they'll figure it out. But man, like, spoiled.
That was the word that was on the tip of my tongue. They're spoiled. They've been good the last 20 years. I mean, we gotta speak facts. They
have
won a bunch of championships. Gary Patterson was one of 2 head coaches with a statue outside the stadium. It was Gary Patterson and Nick Saban. That's pretty good company to be in. But of course, we're talking about the TCU Horned Frogs versus the U of H Cougars on Friday night. That's 2 of SMU's rivals, in a Big 12 matchup for pretty much the bottom of the Big 12. Couldn't happen to 2 better teams. The U of H had not won in Fort Worth since 1989, which was Andre Ware's senior season, and that's pretty cool that he got to call the game and be there for that win. I think he does a great job. I've always enjoyed listening to him, but Cougars never trailed as they get the win 30-19 in Fort Worth, and U of H's offense had been terrible, atrocious in the last 2 games. 0 points in the last 8 quarters going into this game. But they had 24 at halftime. Frog fans are claiming, I've never seen a TCU program this bad. Well, look back to when we were good, and we won 15 in a row versus TCU. Let's pump our brakes here. We're talking 15 years between wins over one team that you play every season. But look, I also read somewhere that they're kicking former TCU players off the sideline, and I'm not 100% if that's true or not. I've seen multiple posts all claiming the same thing. If that's true, TCU should be ashamed of themselves, honestly. If college football is a 40-year decision, you should want former players on your sideline with their wives, with their kids, even grandkids, because that's where some of these guys are coming. They're bringing their, generations of their family to TCU games, and they're raising, future alums. If that's me getting kicked off the sideline, if for whatever reason, in 15 years, I'm bringing my kids back and it's a new program or new coaches, and they tell me to get off the sideline, one, I'm never showing my face again around the program because of what a kick in the balls that is. My donations, as are others who would go through the same thing, donations, appearances from former players are going to be reduced to 0. And this is just all out embarrassing for TCU's program. I'm not really surprised, honestly, but the season is going down the drain for TCU, and fans are rightfully upset. It's a little extreme, but coming 2 years from a national championship appearance, it's getting more and more obvious of what great talent that Gary Patterson was able to bring to the program. And obviously, I think Coach Dykes and Kaz Kazadi were able to speak to the veteran players on that team and get them to play at a high level 2 years ago. But unfortunately, you can't rest on your laurels in college football. Ed Ogeron got fired around this time after winning a national championship, not just making an appearance in one. So this has been a complete transformation of the TCU football program. This program is a dumpster fire at this point, unfortunately. And I love it as an SMU alum. I mean, you just have to. I mean, even though, like I've talked about before, like Sonny and I are good friends. I respect him a lot for what he's done. I mean, just look at the program, man. They are losing the bottom of the barrel Big 12 teams now.
Yeah, you said so much so well, and I don't know where they go from here. I don't know if he has not only the money, but the backing to make any changes midseason. I mean, I'll say this, and I don't know Kendall Browse, I don't know Andy Avalos, but just talking with different people about how they do their business. Like, I think Kendall Browse is a very good play caller. I really do. But a lot of people just were like, for obvious reasons, but even beyond that, just why hire that guy? And then Andy Avalos, he's really somebody that nationally, I had people texting me saying, man, SMU might have just a field day with this guy. Not only on the field, but once the word gets out about just kind of how he is recruiting and things like that, and how he actually treats his players, people were like, if TCU wins a recruiting battle on defensive player, just let them go. Fine. You'll see them in 365 days or sooner in some cases. So I don't know what's going on at the top, but if it's so bad, I do like if they crater, which I would imagine some TCU fans would tell you they have cratered. But if they go like one win the rest of the way, I do wonder if maybe Sonny just retires or steps away. Like, I don't know if he would want to even return under that type of a situation in 25.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm speculating. But
it would be a really hard, slow death in that situation where fans are calling for your head all off season. Your seat is red hot in that scenario. Realistically, unless you go out and win the conference, you're more than likely not going to be there the next year. But very questionable hires. Sonny brought over an all-star staff. He had some really great coaches on that staff. Randall Joyner is one of the best defensive line coaches I've been around. He was a guy that got a lot out of his players, had super high energy, brought that over from Ohio State, really just got a lot out of his guys. You're talking about
Chadira. Yeah, he's at Georgia, killing it.
Rashad,
killing
Coach
it.
Stamp, in the NFL. A lot of guys that were some really great coaches, and unfortunately, he just hasn't been able to replace them with even similar, comparable talent.
Yeah, shout out Kevin Kane too. Awesome dude, doing well.
I love Kevin Kane. So he was a great
ever. Yeah, he and his wife are great. Love their family. Sure. Awesome.
No doubt. So yeah, just tough situations all around in Fort Worth.
Yeah. Is there any better way to end the podcast than talking about another TCU loss?
Maybe we need to get Bill on here, and we can really get after it.
I love it. We need to coordinate that. He is he's loving it. I would imagine he's working on his diatribe about Sonny right now for the pod. So, all right. Well, what a weekend in college football. What a weekend for SMU. Hayden, any closing thoughts?
Just want this team to go into the bye, with that same hungry attitude they did after the BYU game. Just because we've won 3 in a row, it doesn't mean anything. If you don't show up after the bye week, every team in this league can beat you. They're still, while it's a non-zero chance, this team could not win the rest of the year if they don't show up right, and things just spiral. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think this team has enough maturity and enough leadership to go into this bye the right way. But this is the second out of 3 byes. We're halfway through the season at this point, and there's so much to play for. I mean, if you're an SMU fan who's watched this team through the last 20 years, I mean, it's easy to say we're back. We're not going to be truly back until we win the ACC, but it could happen sooner than we think.
Well, with SMU having a ton to play for the back half of the season and basketball starting to hit that fever pitch right now, like people getting ready for the season. Tell you what, I don't know if you've ever seen the meme of the dishwasher or cook or whatever. He's sitting on the bench and he's got the cigarette in his hands, head down. That might be me come end of the season. Like I'm just, I'm going to be tired. I'm on single dad watch this week. The wife's on a work trip, but we're just going to try to buckle down, get a little bit better on this bye week and get organized for a huge stretch run across SMU athletics. I mean, volleyball, soccer. I mean, everybody just pulling their own weight here to put it together for SMU.
You're going to stay busy, man. We're in everything school now.
Yeah, that's it. Hey, print the shirts, Hayden. Print the shirts. All right, everyone. Well, appreciate you guys stopping in to hang out with the On the Pony Express podcast. For Hayden Howerton, I'm Billy Embody. Head to ontheponyexpress.com today. Get on there. Get on the message board. Talk with Hayden. Talk with myself, the whole staff. Tons of members on there. It's basically a networking forum at this point, too. So hope you guys enjoy this podcast. We'll catch you guys later this week with a special guest joining the show for the bye week. So shout out Hayden for that, and we'll catch you guys with that episode later this week. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU on3 and on Instagram at on3SMU. And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.